At first glance, this place seems like the perfect valley, until you stay and discover its secrets. Because some places aren't discovered, they impose themselves. Lauterbrunnen is one of them. The valley closes in like a giant hand. The rock walls drop almost vertically. The waterfalls don't decorate. They watch over the landscape. Everything is too clean, too still, too precise. Here, silence isn't the absence of noise, it's a constant presence. Every footstep echoes, every glance carries weight. Lauterbrunnen is marketed as an alpine paradise, the Swiss dream made into a postcard. But living here isn't about contemplation. It's about adapting. It's about understanding codes no one explains, unwritten rules, gestures that mean more than words. In this valley, long-time Swiss families coexist with seasonal workers, backpackers, Japanese tourists fascinated by Europe, Latinos who stand out unintentionally, and a community that observes before accepting. Therefore, on this journey you will discover the real life behind the scenery. The extreme order, the quiet allure, the beautiful and reserved women, the culture clashes, the gastronomy, the social pressure, the nights that don't appear on Instagram, and the shadows hidden behind so much perfection. Because Lauterbrunnen isn't a place that welcomes you, it's a place that tests you, and those who enter believing it's a trip often leave understanding that it was a test. Let's begin. Entering the valley. When beauty overwhelms. Arriving in Lauterbrunnen is no accident. The journey itself is a warning. The train slowly winds its way between ever higher mountains. The villages grow smaller, and the landscape begins to close in. When you finally disembark at the station, the first sensation isn't joy, it's silence. A clean, profound, almost intimidating silence. There's no chaos, no rush, no improvisation. Everything seems exactly where it should be, from the dark wooden houses to the perfectly manicured meadows. The valley is narrow, and that narrowness is felt in the body. The rock walls drop almost vertically, as if the place had been designed to constantly remind you that there is no visual escape. Above, waterfalls plunge from hundreds of meters high. They aren't decorative. They were there before the village, before Switzerland as a country. They are part of the character of the place. The water falls with a hypnotic constancy, marking a rhythm that doesn't change for anyone. The foreigner, upon arrival, feels something difficult to explain. It's not hostility, nor is it a welcome. It's evaluation. Lauterbrunnen is small, too small to go unnoticed. The clothes, the way people walk, the way they look. Everything draws attention without anyone making it obvious. There are no blatant stares here, but there are long, silent, precise glances. Judgments aren't quick, but everything is observed. Many arrive with the idea of stepping into a fairy tale, and for the first few minutes the place confirms that fantasy. Houses with balconies overflowing with flowers, cows grazing to the soft chimes of bells, paths that seem designed for perfect photographs. But that feeling doesn't last long. Very soon another layer appears, that of discipline, absolute order, the idea that, here, things are done only one way. Lauterbrunnen isn't Switzerland as many imagine it from the outside. It's not just chocolate, watches, and neutrality. It's a microcosm where social control operates without visible police, without shouting, without direct confrontations. A single glance, a silence longer than usual, is enough to understand that something is amiss. Foreigners quickly learn that here, there's no improvisation, no intrusion, no exaggeration. Walking through the village is an almost theatrical experience. Everything is so meticulously maintained that one feels any personal misstep disrupts the harmony. Speaking too loudly, dressing flamboyantly, behaving like a typical tourist, all of it stands out. And when something stands out in Lauterbrunnen, it's noticeable. Not because someone points it out, but because the environment itself exposes it. The beauty is overwhelming because it leaves no room to hide. In big cities, the foreigner blends in. Not here. Here, each person is a new variable in a system that has functioned for decades without needing changes. Local families know each other. They know who lives where, who works with whom, who belongs and who is just passing through. The visitor enters as a temporary element, tolerated, observed, never central. The first dose of reality usually comes quickly. It might be a small gesture, a curt instruction, a silent correction, a rule no one explained but everyone expects to be followed. It's not ill intent. It's culture. Lauterbrunnen doesn't adapt to the visitor. The visitor must adapt to the valley. Some feel a profound calm here, others a growing unease. Some relax with the order, while others feel oppressed by it. Because perfection, when constant, is tiring. There's no room for emotional turmoil, no space for creative chaos. Everything has its time, its form, and its limit, and yet most are captivated, not for pleasure, but for intensity. Lauterbrunnen doesn't seduce you overtly, it slowly wins you over. The landscape dominates you, the silence reorders you, and the social control forces you to look at yourself more closely. Some discover they fit in better than they thought. Others realize they couldn't live here for even a month. This is just the first encounter. The valley has already spoken without saying a word, and those who pay attention understand something essential. Lauterbrunnen is not a place to come and let loose. It's a place that squeezes you tight first, to see who you are when you can't hide. Absolute order. Rules no one explains. In Lauterbrunnen, order isn't announced. There are no intimidating signs or moralizing speeches. They're not needed. Social control functions as an invisible system, so integrated into daily life that those born here no longer perceive it as control, but as normality. Foreigners, on the other hand, feel it from day one, even if they can't always put a name to it. It's a constant feeling of being slightly out of place, even when no one tells you directly. Unwritten rules are the true language of the valley. Schedules are one of the first culture shocks. It's not just about respecting nighttime rest, which is strictly regulated in Switzerland, but about understanding that each time of day has an expected behavior. In the morning, the valley awakens early and in silence. There are no horns, no visible rush, no unnecessary conversations. Noise isn't prohibited by law at every moment, but it is culturally. Making noise without reason is interpreted as a lack of self-control, something viewed with suspicion here. Silence is not emptiness, it is language. In Lauterbrunnen, knowing when to be silent is a sign of good manners. Talking too much, even with good intentions, can be uncomfortable. Many foreigners mistake Swiss friendliness for immediate familiarity. It isn't. Cordiality exists, but it is distant, measured, precise. A proper greeting, a brief smile, a functional conversation. Going further without having earned that space can create an unspoken discomfort, but one that is immediately felt. Eye contact plays a key role. It's not aggressive or inquisitive, but evaluative. When someone breaks an unspoken rule, there is no direct confrontation, there is observation, and that observation carries weight. A foreigner who speaks too loudly on the train, who crosses the street outside of a designated crosswalk, or who sits in an inappropriate place begins to notice subtle changes. Less eye contact, shorter answers, a widening distance. It's not explicit punishment, it's social correction. The weight of Swiss order is also evident in everyday life. Trash, for example, is not a minor detail. Sorting it incorrectly, putting it out at the wrong time, or using the wrong bags is a clear sign that someone doesn't understand how the community works. In Lauterbrunnen, where everyone knows each other, these mistakes don't go unnoticed. Not because anyone wants to humiliate anyone, but because the system is designed so that each person is responsible for their impact on the whole. There are very real cases of foreigners who unwittingly cause discomfort. A backpacker decided to listen to music on a portable speaker while walking through the valley, believing that the natural surroundings invited him to share his enthusiasm. No one yelled at him. No one insulted him. He simply began to feel the space closing in. People who had previously greeted him stopped doing so. The atmosphere changed. At the end of the day, he understood that here the landscape isn't filled with noise, it's respected with silence. Another frequent example is that of the visitor who arrives with the idea of relaxing, as if they were at a resort. Drinking alcohol in public spaces outside of designated areas, laughing loudly at night or walking erratically may be legal, but it's not acceptable. In Lauterbrunnen, freedom exists within a very clear framework. Stepping outside that framework doesn't make you a criminal, but it does make you someone who doesn't fit in. And not fitting in here is felt quickly. Social transgressions are paid for dearly, not in money, but in isolation. No one expels you, but no one integrates you. And in such a small place, that difference is enormous. The foreigner who fails to decipher the unspoken rules becomes a peripheral figure. They're still there, but outside the real flow of local life. They don't receive invitations, they don't participate in deep conversations, they don't go beyond the surface. Punctuality is another sacred rule. Arriving late isn't interpreted as friendly or relaxed, but as disrespectful. Other people's time is valued as much as your own. In meetings, temporary jobs, or even informal get-togethers, the agreed-upon time isn't a suggestion, it's a commitment. Many foreigners miss opportunities simply because they don't understand this detail. There's also the way people occupy space. In Lauterbrunnen, nothing is encroached upon. The gardens, the paths, even the public benches have an implicit logic. Sitting where one shouldn't, crossing where one shouldn't, or touching what isn't one's own disrupts a harmony that the valley protects with quiet firmness. Here, respect is shown by not touching, not altering, not leaving an unnecessary trace. Women among the mountains, beauty, distance, and restrained desire. In Lauterbrunnen, feminine beauty isn't displayed, it's perceived. It doesn't immediately and overwhelmingly overwhelm the eye, but rather emerges over time, when one learns to look without anxiety. The Swiss women of the valley don't stand out for exaggerated gestures or an aesthetic design to attract attention. Their presence is understated, firm, almost silent. They walk with confidence, look straight ahead when appropriate, and lower their gaze without discomfort when the situation demands it. There's no theatricality, no obvious game, and precisely for that reason, they arouse so much interest. Their features are usually clear, skin tempered by the cold climate, strong rather than delicate bodies, upright postures that reflect discipline instilled in childhood. Here, the body isn't built to seduce, it's built to endure. Walking long distances, working, climbing and descending slopes, enduring long winters. All of this shapes a distinct aesthetic, more functional than decorative. This functionality, paradoxically, proves profoundly attractive to many foreigners. A reserved nature is perhaps the most misunderstood trait. From the outside, many men mistake distance for coldness and a lack of emotional expression for disinterest. Nothing could be further from the truth. In Lauterbrunnen, revealing one's feelings too soon is seen as a weakness, not a virtue. Closeness is built slowly, through consistency, respect, and perseverance. A brief but meaningful conversation is worth more than a torrent of words. The local women know exactly who they are and their place in the community. They don't need external validation. They don't try to impress visitors or compete for attention. This throws many men, accustomed to more direct or explicit dynamics, off balance. Here, interest isn't pursued, it's allowed. And only when the conditions are right. There's a clear difference between the local women and the foreign women who come to the valley. The visitors, whether European, Latin American, or Asian, bring with them other ways of expressing curiosity, attraction, or closeness. Some are more open, more verbal, more gestural. In contrast, the women of Lauterbrunnen observe first. They evaluate. They compare behaviors. They don't judge aloud, but they take everything in. Attraction, when it exists, manifests itself almost imperceptibly. A gaze that lingers a second longer than usual. A question that isn't strictly necessary. A precise comment that demonstrates attentiveness. There's no obvious flirting or visible games of seduction. Desire here isn't acted out, it's managed. It's kept, dosed, controlled. For many foreign men, the contrast between fantasy and reality is stark. They arrive imagining an idyllic setting where the romantic landscape facilitates spontaneous encounters. They believe that the beauty of the surroundings softens the rules. In reality, the opposite is true. The more perfect the place, the stricter the codes. Lauterbrunnen doesn't invite you to lose control. It invites you to demonstrate it. What truly attracts is not insistence or exaggerated confidence, nor is it boisterous charisma or direct seduction. Here, what attracts is calmness, the ability to listen, respect for personal space, consistency between words and actions. A man who knows how to behave in silence, who understands when to speak and when not to, is far more interesting than someone who tries to stand out. What generates immediate rejection is usually the opposite: the invasion of personal space, humor out of context, the need for constant attention. Early sexualization, even in the form of flattery, is perceived as a sign of emotional immaturity. In Lauterbrunnen, explicit desire is not considered romantic, but clumsy. Local women also quickly distinguish between genuine curiosity and exoticism. The visitor who is interested in the culture, the pace of life, and the norms of the valley is viewed differently than the one who is only looking for an intense experience before leaving. Here, even brief encounters are governed by a code of conduct. Not everything that is possible is acceptable. Contained desire does not mean an absence of desire. On the contrary, restraint intensifies it. The lack of immediate access generates constant tension, an expectation that is fueled by small gestures. For those who know how to read them, those gestures are clear. For those who don't, they go unnoticed. Lauterbrunnen doesn't translate his signals for anyone. Foreigners in paradise, Japanese, Latin Americans, and culture shock. Lauterbrunnen is not a place you arrive at by chance. Those who descend into the valley do so with a very clear idea: to see one of the most perfect landscapes in Europe. Waterfalls cascading from vertical cliffs, impossibly green meadows, wooden houses that seem frozen in time. But what many don't anticipate is that this setting also acts as a human magnet. Here, it's not just mountains and trails that intersect. Cultures, expectations, and very different ways of understanding proximity also converge. The foreigners who arrive in Lauterbrunnen tend to belong to well-defined profiles. European backpackers in search of extreme nature, Latin American travelers fascinated by Swiss precision, Asian tourists drawn to the almost surreal image of the valley. Among them, Japanese visitors occupy a particular place within the village's social ecosystem. Not because of their numbers, but because of their cultural contrast. Japanese tourists usually arrive with an attitude of intense observation and absolute respect for the environment. They photograph in silence, walk carefully, and follow unspoken rules even when no one has explained them. For the locals, this behavior feels familiar, almost comfortable. For the European and Latin American men who also visit the valley, this combination of reserve, curiosity, and sensitivity evokes an immediate fascination. There is a mutual attraction that is rarely spoken. Japanese women, accustomed to highly structured societies, perceive in certain European and Latin American men a different emotional ease, a less rigid form of presence. Not to be confused with disorder. What attracts them is naturalness. The ability to converse without hierarchies, to laugh without breaking the spell, to show interest without being imposing. For their part, many foreign men interpret this silent attention as a more direct invitation than it actually is. Here, the first culture shocks appear. In Japan, a sustained gaze or a brief smile can have very specific but also profoundly ambiguous meanings. In Lauterbrunnen, that gesture passes through a double filter. that of Japanese culture and that of Swiss social order. The margin for error becomes narrow. The romances that blossom in this setting tend to be brief, intense, and discreet. Long walks, deep conversations without too many words, a connection built more on shared experience than on classic seduction. There are no public scenes or exaggerated gestures. Everything happens on the sidelines. A longer than necessary stop, an implicit invitation to share a path, a coffee that stretches on without explanation. Latin Americans in particular face an additional challenge. Their natural way of expressing themselves is often more open, more physical, more verbal. In many parts of the world, this is attractive. In Lauterbrunnen, it can be disconcerting, not because it's forbidden, but because it disrupts the valley's rhythm. Some manage to adapt, modulating their energy, sharpening their listening skills. Others don't understand why they create discomfort without having said anything explicitly wrong. The culture clash doesn't always manifest as visible conflict. Sometimes a glance that isn't returned, a conversation cut short, an invitation that never arrives is enough. The social error here isn't corrected with loud apologies, but with quiet learning. And not everyone is willing to do that. There are things that are allowed without being spoken aloud. Sharing time, walking together, talking about travel, work, or landscapes. Even a restrained emotional closeness can be accepted if it stays within certain limits. What breaks the balance is haste. Trying to accelerate processes, seeking quick answers, bringing the private into the public sphere. Lauterbrunnen punishes impatience with distance. Real stories abound, though few are told aloud. The European who thought he'd understood a sign and ended up socially isolated for the rest of his stay. The Japanese traveler who felt deeply attracted to a Latin man, but quietly withdrew when she sensed he was looking for something more explicit than she was willing to offer. The local who observed everything from afar, aware that the valley always imposes its own rules. There are also encounters that work precisely because no one tries to force them. Two people from opposite cultures who agree on respecting the rhythm of the place. They understand that not every interest needs to translate into action. They accept the temporary nature of the encounter without dramatizing it. These connections, though brief, often leave a lasting impression. Living here isn't a vacation. From the outside, Lauterbrunnen looks like a promise fulfilled. Waterfalls cascading as if placed there on purpose, perfectly green meadows, wooden houses aligned with an almost unreal precision. For first-time visitors, the thought is almost automatic. Living here must be a permanent privilege, a kind of endless vacation. That idea doesn't last long. Very short. The real life of the residents begins when the visitors leave, or rather, when they all arrive at once. Tourism isn't a season. It's a constant presence that permeates everything. Trains unload groups early in the morning. Backpacks, cameras, drones, conversations in different languages mingling in a valley that, until recently, was accustomed to hearing only the wind and the water. For those who live here, this picture-perfect scene is also a workplace that never shuts down. Many residents depend directly or indirectly on tourism. Hotels, restaurants, transportation, maintenance, mountain activities. The rhythm isn't dictated by the clock, but by the season. There are long, physically demanding, repetitive days. Always attend to people politely, maintain composure, explain the same thing over and over to people who are just passing through and who rarely perceive the weariness on the other end. Swiss order doesn't relax just because you're exhausted. It's still followed. The cost of living is another silent filter. Lauterbrunnen isn't a cheap place, not even for the Swiss. Rent is high, supply is limited, and the real estate pressure is constant. Many homes have been converted into temporary accommodations, reducing the space available for those who want a stable life. Living in the heart of the valley has become a luxury that not everyone can afford, even working full-time. Herein lies one of the harshest contradictions of paradise. The place that millions dream of visiting slowly expels those who can't keep up with the economic pace. Some move to nearby towns, Others resign themselves to sharing cramped spaces. Others simply leave. There's no public drama, no noisy protests. Only silent decisions made around a table, with numbers that don't add up. The difference between the picture postcard setting and the reality is keenly felt in winter. When the tourist flow decreases, the cold truly settles in. Short days, long nights, less activity. The valley becomes more introspective, more closed off. For some, this is the most authentic time. For others, the hardest. The beauty is still there, but it ceases to be a distraction. What remains is silence, order, repetition. The mental exhaustion isn't something openly discussed, but it's palpable. Living surrounded by perfection creates a particular kind of pressure. There's no room for carelessness. The lawns must always be cut, the facade spotless, behavior measured. External expectations seep into private life. Even at home, the standard doesn't drop. It's not about competing, it's about not standing out. Some newcomers, especially foreigners, take time to understand this. They arrive with the idea of a change of pace, of calm, of connecting with nature. The first few months are usually intense and positive. Everything is new, everything is impressive. Then routine sets in. The same view every day, the same route, the same rules. And that's when the question arises that not everyone dares to ask, is this enough? The order, which at first is reassuring, can eventually become oppressive. Not because it's unfair, but because it's constant. There's no room for chaos, for visible mistakes, for creative disorder. Everything works, everything is planned. For some people, that's stability. For others, it's an invisible cage. There are stories of people who arrived convinced they had found their forever home, and who, after a couple of years, left quietly. They didn't fail. They simply understood that the psychological price was higher than they were willing to pay. Living in such a closely watched, regulated, and efficient place demands a specific kind of inner strength. Constant tourism also affects human relationships. The constant turnover of faces means that bonds are built cautiously. Is it worth investing emotionally in someone who will be gone in a week? That logic seeps in even among residents. Relationships become functional, adequate, but rarely deep at first glance. Trust is built slowly here because the environment is already changing so rapidly. The dark side of the perfect valley. Lauterbrunnen seems like a place designed to escape all the darkness of the world. Waterfalls cascading silently, green meadows that seem to stretch endlessly, houses aligned with a precision that exudes calm. But visual perfection isn't always synonymous with inner peace. Behind the idyllic landscape lies a constant tension, invisible to those who only visit for a couple of days. This tension has names, stories, and consequences that don't appear in tourist brochures or on the postcards sold at the resort. Isolation plays a fundamental role. Surrounded by vertical mountains, with a winter that encloses the valley in silence, and a summer that attracts crowds that disappear at the end of the season, living here means dealing with extremes. The routine is demanding, the budget can be tight, and the social pressure is constant. Every gesture is observed, every social misstep remembered. For some, this silent surveillance is normal. For others, it becomes a psychological burden that, over time, transforms into a weight difficult to bear. There are documented cases of suicides and accidents that seem to stem from the contrast between external beauty and internal discomfort. They are not frequent, but they are enough to generate a latent murmur, a feeling that the valley's perfection comes at an invisible price. Stories of people who came seeking inspiration or tranquility, and who, over time, felt that the place absorbed them more than it offered. The solitude, even amidst seasonal crowds, can be overwhelming. The constant physical labor, combined with the responsibility of maintaining a pristine environment and the need to meet societal expectations, also contributes to the tension. Those who live in the valley cannot afford to fail. Even the smallest oversight is noticed. This pressure accumulates, sometimes silently, and translates into chronic stress, anxiety, or demotivation. The same beauty that dazzles visitors can generate a feeling of inadequacy in those who must sustain it every day. Accidents in the mountains are another dark side of local life. Lauterbrunnen attracts people who want to experience hiking, climbing, and extreme sports. Not everyone knows the terrain. Conditions change rapidly, and the weather can turn dangerous without warning. Residents, experts on the environment, are usually the ones who intervene in rescues or maintain safety protocols, but even they know that the valley's nature doesn't forgive mistakes. Every fall, every accident, leaves a mark that isn't measured in statistics, but in family stories and community silences. The psychological stress is also amplified by the constant perception of being watched, not only by the community, but also by tourists. The continuous presence of cameras, eyes, and expectations creates a double pressure to remain impeccable for visitors and, at the same time, to maintain one's own daily routine without succumbing to exhaustion. The result is an emotional drain that, although invisible to the average visitor, is noticeable in gestures, silences, and the way relationships develop. Furthermore, there is a cumulative effect of living surrounded by extreme beauty. The contrast between the harmony of the landscape and the internal conflicts that everyone carries can be intensified. Lauterbrunnen offers no distractions. The valley's perfection forces personal problems to confront oneself head-on. The constant contemplation of nature, which for many would be a balm, can become a mirror reflecting frustrations, limitations, and unfulfilled desires. Rumors, in turn, circulate discreetly. Suicides, accidents, silent conflicts. No one announces them, but everyone knows about them. They are spoken of in whispers, in empty cafes after the high season, among residents who have learned to coexist with the shadow these stories cast. This emotional shadow doesn't negate the beauty of the place, but it adds a dimension that the tourist never perceives: the perfect valley. What visitors don't see. Lauterbrunnen holds hidden corners that don't appear on any tourist map or in glossy brochures. Narrow alleyways, paths behind waterfalls, viewpoints that don't receive GPS signals. These are areas the average visitor doesn't set foot in, not by force, but by a tacit agreement. What isn't offered is respected. There, far from the curious gaze, life moves differently, more slowly, more authentically, and sometimes uncomfortably. Local conflicts rarely surface. The community has learned to live with internal tensions silently. Family feuds, disagreements over property, clashes between long-time residents and new tourist businesses. Everything is resolved behind closed doors, in discreet cafes, or simply with measured gestures that avoid open confrontation. To a visitor, the valley may seem homogeneous, perfect, almost idyllic. The reality, however, is more complex. There is a subtle aversion to mass tourism. Lauterbrunnen depends on it, but it also tolerates it within invisible limits. There's a growing weariness. People whose homes are invaded by curious onlookers who take photos without asking, who ignore local schedules, who shatter natural silences. Residents handle this with courtesy, but the weariness is palpable in averted glances, brief answers, and an unspoken distance. Certain questions are never asked. No one publicly questions why someone lingers so long at the train station, or why prices rise every season. The community's secrets, accidents, tales of discouragement, unspoken disputes, are shared only among those who belong to the valley. Visitors quickly learn that some topics are best left untouched. Asking too many questions is tantamount to branding yourself as an outsider, as someone who doesn't understand the unwritten rules. What is known but left unsaid forms an invisible code. Everyone knows the story of the family that lost their property to a tourist business, the accidents on back roads, the peak tourist seasons that create tension. No one shouts it from the rooftops. Everything is handled discreetly. This opacity creates a double effect. On the one hand, it protects privacy. On the other, it generates curiosity and an aura of mystery that makes the valley seem even more perfect. Living in Lauterbrunnen comes at a real price that visitors rarely perceive. It's the cost of patience, discretion, and maintaining composure in the face of the constant flow of tourists and seasonal changes. It's learning to measure every word, every gesture, every decision. It's a routine that blends admiration for beauty with an awareness of invisible limits, and that demands constant emotional balance. In this valley, external perfection is maintained only through layers of silent effort, tacit agreements, and unspoken rules. What visitors don't see is what sustains the picture postcard image, the invisible work, the contained tension, the real life behind the mirror. And understanding this is understanding that Lauterbrunnen is not only a place of beauty, but also a stage where everything is measured, even without words. Ultimately, understanding Lauterbrunnen means understanding that the valley functions like a well-regulated organism, where visual beauty and social discipline are intertwined. Modern beliefs, daily rituals, and a devotion to order are not mere embellishments, but the very backbone of life here. And it is this very backbone that makes the valley unforgettable. Not because it is easy, nor because it is forgiving, but because it tests those who enter and reminds everyone that in this corner of Switzerland, perfection is not a gift. It is a standard, a test, and a silent lesson that only those who experience it can fully grasp. Lauterbrunnen is not a place to get lost in. It is a place that tests you.